Waiting is a theme that you can see throughout the entirety of scriptures, all the way back to the very first story of God calling Abraham. You see God give Abraham a promise, and that promise doesn't come to fruition until many, many decades later. And so we see this sense already of waiting that happens in that original story of call and of God beginning the salvation plan. And we see that continue throughout as a motif through other Old Testament stories. We see Moses, who tries to do something on behalf of Israel to save Israel, to be a mediator for Israel, and because of his actions ends up having to run away into the desert and spends a time kind of like unintentionally waiting for 40 years before God's call comes to him and brings him back into service to Israel. And then once he actually gets to Israel and calls Israel out, Israel is brought into the desert, and because of their own complaining and whining and disobedience, they're left waiting and wandering for 40 years in the desert. And this theme continues throughout the whole story of Israel, as we see them waiting for a king, as they see them waiting for union, if they see them waiting for the rebuilding of the temple, as they see them waiting in exile to be returned to their land. All these various different moments of waiting. And so it's not really that surprising when you look at the Psalms, when you look at the prophets, and you see how many times the theme and the idea of waiting on God comes up. And so this week we're going to take a look through these 6 days at waiting and understand a little bit about the role that waiting plays in our relationship with God. There's some really interesting works out there on waiting, and I would highly recommend a book that I've been working through recently by Andrew Murray called Waiting on God. It's basically short 30 chapters that you can do as kind of daily devotionals or daily times of reflection in the morning for an entire month. And he looks through all the different times that waiting is talked about in the Old Testament. And I also thought that this was a really apt time in our current day to be talking about waiting, because many of us are sitting around in our homes and we're just waiting. We're waiting for someone to call us. We're waiting to hear news from a loved one. We're waiting to hear news from work. We're waiting to hear news from our church. We're waiting for the ban on going out and spending time or working out in public to be lifted. We're waiting to see what the efforts we're making are going to have as an impact on the spread of COVID-19. We're waiting to see the science develop and for people to have a better knowledge of COVID-19 and its danger to us. There's so many things we're waiting for. But wouldn't it be good if we spent our time waiting for something a little more positive in this moment, where we cultivated in this time of forced waiting, a more intentional waiting on God, and learn what it means for us, or what it could mean for us, to wait on God. As I approach this topic these next few days, I want you to keep an open mind to the concept of waiting on God, that maybe there's something significant to the action of waiting on God that is more important in and of itself than what you're waiting for or the end goal. And we're going to look at that and explore that in the days to come. So I hope you come back and reflect with us in the next few days.